What if I told you there was a man on this earth thousands of years ago who never died? Not a legend, not a myth, not a bedtime story passed down through generations. A real man, documented in the oldest religious texts ever discovered on this planet. And the reason he never died might be the most disturbing thing you have ever heard. Stay with me, because this story goes much deeper than you think. This is not the story they taught you in Sunday school. This is the story behind the story, the one buried in ancient manuscripts that were hidden for over 1,000 years. The one that religious scholars have argued about behind closed doors for centuries. The one that certain powerful institutions worked very hard to keep out of your hands. This is the story of Enoch. And to understand Enoch, you first need to understand the world he was born into. Because that world was broken. Not in the way our world is broken. Not corruption and politics and social media outrage. Something far darker, far older, far more terrifying. The ancient texts describe a civilization that had been growing for generations. Cities were built. Kingdoms rose. People lived, worked, ate, drank, and celebrated. But underneath all of that, something had gone horribly wrong. Violence wasn't just common. It was celebrated. The strong crushed the weak without shame or consequence. Power was the only currency that mattered. Truth had become worthless. And the spiritual connection that once existed between humanity and its creator had been almost completely severed. Men had forgotten who made them. And when men forget who made them, they start acting like nothing made them at all. But here is where the story gets dark in a way that most people are never told. According to the Book of Enoch, one of the most controversial ancient texts ever written, this corruption wasn't entirely humanity's fault. Something had come from outside. Beings, called the Watchers. The Book of Enoch describes them as powerful divine entities, part of a celestial order, who were assigned to observe and guide humanity from a distance. They were watchers, not participants, but they crossed a line that was never supposed to be crossed. They looked down at humanity and they wanted in. 200 of them descended to earth. They took human wives. They had children, monstrous, powerful children that the ancient texts call the Nephilim, giants, beings of extraordinary size and strength who terrorized everything around them. But even more dangerous than the Nephilim was the knowledge the Watchers brought with them. Forbidden knowledge. Knowledge that was never meant for human hands. Secrets of warfare. Secrets of sorcery. Secrets of manipulation and dark arts. Things that accelerated humanity's descent into chaos faster than anything humanity could have done on its own. The earth filled with blood. And God looked down at what his creation had become. And into that darkness, into that broken, bleeding, corrupted world, a child was born. His name was Enoch. And nobody, not one single person, could have guessed what this child would become, or how his story would end. There is an ancient book, older than the Bible as most people know it, referenced by early church fathers, quoted directly in the New Testament, preserved for thousands of years by one of the oldest Christian churches on the planet. And this book describes fallen angels, in specific detail, teaching human beings how to make weapons of war, how to cast spells, how to use beauty as a weapon, how to read the stars not for wisdom, but for control. That book is called the Book of Enoch, and it was deliberately removed from the Bible that most of you were raised reading. Let that land for a second. Not lost. Not accidentally left out. Removed. Now before we go further, understand something important. The Book of Enoch he taught men how to forge swords, how to make shields and armor, how to craft weapons of war on a scale that had never existed before. He taught women how to use cosmetics and jewelry as tools of seduction. Not beauty for beauty's sake, but beauty weaponized for manipulation. Other Watchers taught sorcery, dark enchantments, how to bind and curse, how to use the movements of celestial bodies not for wisdom or navigation, but for power over other people. The ancient text says plainly, the earth was filled with blood and unrighteousness because of what was taught. Think about that. A group of divine beings essentially handed humanity a set of tools, and humanity used every single one of those tools to destroy itself faster. Enoch was alive during all of this. He watched it unfold. He saw what the Watchers had done. He saw the Nephilim terrorizing the land, He saw the dark knowledge spreading through civilization like a virus, and unlike everyone around him, he did not look away. He went to God with what he had seen, and God responded. Enoch began receiving visions, not gentle dreams, not comforting signs, terrifying, overwhelming, world-shaking visions. He was shown the prison prepared for the fallen watchers, a place of darkness and chains where they would wait for their final judgment. He was shown the coming destruction of the earth. He was shown the scales of divine justice, every act of cruelty recorded, every drop of innocent blood remembered, nothing forgotten and nothing unpunished. He was shown the full weight of what was coming, and then God told him something that changed his life forever. Go, tell them, warn them. Enoch, a quiet man in a violent world, was sent back to that world with the heaviest message anyone has ever been asked to carry. And the world wanted nothing to do with it. Imagine knowing that civilization is about to be destroyed. Not suspecting, not fearing, knowing. You have seen it, clearly, in detail, with a certainty that sits in your chest like a stone that never moves. And now imagine spending decades, your entire life, trying to warn people who laugh in your face, who call you unstable, who walk away mid-sentence, who tell their children to stay away from the strange man who talks about divine judgment. That was Enoch's life, every single day of it. And the truly terrifying part? He was right about everything. After his visions, Enoch was never the same. He had seen things that cannot be unseen. Cosmic courtrooms, bound angels in chains of darkness. A flood so massive, so complete, so total, that it would effectively erase everything humanity had built and start over. And he had been given a mission he never asked for. Bear witness. Speak truth. Don't stop no matter what they do to you. So he began. The book of Genesis tells us Enoch lived for 365 years, a number equal to the days in a solar year, which ancient scholars have long noted is unlikely to be a coincidence. Whether that number is literal or symbolic has been debated for centuries. What cannot be debated is what Enoch did during that time. He warned, consistently, relentlessly, without ever softening the message to make it more comfortable for the people hearing it. He spoke against the violence the Watchers had seeded into civilization. He spoke against the corruption that had taken root in every level of human society. He told people plainly, not in riddles, not in parables, but plainly, that what they were building was going to fall. And they laughed. Think about what that actually feels like from the inside. You are not just ignored. You are mocked. Openly. People who once respected you now cross the street to avoid you. Rulers dismiss you without a hearing. Religious leaders, the very people who should be most interested in what you have seen, see you as a threat to their authority and work to discredit you. Because what Enoch was saying was not just uncomfortable, it was destabilizing. He was telling a civilization at what felt like the height of its power. Cities expanding, armies strong, people eating and drinking and celebrating, that all of it was about to end. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody ever does. But here is what separated Enoch from every other voice that has ever cried out in the wilderness. He never stopped. Not for 1 year. Not for 1 decade. Not for the entire extraordinary length of his life. The Bible's description of Enoch's entire character fits in 3 words. 3 words. For a man who lived 365 years, he walked with God. In a world where that was the most radical, dangerous, countercultural thing a human being could do, Enoch did it without compromise, without apology, without stopping. And here is the connection that most people completely miss. Enoch was the great-grandfather of Noah. The man who spent his entire life warning that a flood was coming was the direct ancestor of the man who built the ark. Think about what that means. The warning passed through the bloodline. The faith passed through the family. The message that the world rejected somehow survived inside one household, one generation at a time, until it reached the man who would act on it. Enoch warned. Noah built. Enoch was taken before the storm arrived. Noah navigated through it. One planted the seed. One saw the harvest. But before all of that, before Noah, before the ark, before the first drop of rain fell, Enoch had one final mystery left. The most mysterious exit in the history of the human race. He didn't die. That is not a metaphor. That is not poetic language used to describe a peaceful passing or a life well lived. According to the Book of Genesis, one of the oldest and most scrutinized historical documents in human civilization, Enoch simply stopped being here. No grave, no body, no deathbed, no record of illness or injury or old age catching up with him. One day he was here, and then he was not, just gone. Every human being who has ever lived on this earth has one thing in common: they died. Pharaohs who built monuments to their own immortality died. Warriors who conquered entire continents died. Scholars who unlocked the secrets of nature died. Prophets who spoke directly with God died. Every single one, except two. The Bible records only two human beings who departed this earth without dying in the conventional sense. One is the prophet Elijah, caught up in a whirlwind with a chariot of fire, witnessed by his student Elisha. The other is Enoch, and Enoch's departure is described in a sentence so simple and so devastating that it has haunted readers for thousands of years. 8 words. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more because God took him. 8 words. No dramatic scene, no crowd of witnesses, no final speech, no description of light or sound or any physical event. Just he was no more. Imagine being one of the people who knew him. Yesterday the strange old prophet was here, warning, praying, living his impossible, countercultural, stubborn life. Today he is not anywhere. Not dead. You would know if he was dead. There would be a body. There would be a grave to visit and a death to mourn. But there is no body. There is no grave. There is no explanation that satisfies the ordinary rules of how human lives end. He is simply absent. Some people would have been terrified. Some would have dismissed it, made up an explanation that fit better with the world they understood. But quietly, in the back of every mind, one question would have surfaced. What if he was telling the truth? What if everything he warned us about was real? The ancient traditions surrounding Enoch's disappearance are extraordinary. Jewish tradition says he was taken up to heaven alive, translated bodily from one realm to another, bypassing the death that every other human being has faced. Some accounts say he was transformed in that moment, that what ascended was something no longer fully bound by the limitations of human existence. The Book of Enoch describes his journey in vivid detail, being guided by angelic beings through multiple layers of celestial reality, being brought before the throne of divine judgment, being shown the complete accounting of human history, every act, every choice, every consequence, and being given a permanent position as the scribe of heaven, the one who records what is true for eternity. Whether you read that literally or symbolically, the meaning is the same. Enoch's faithfulness was recognized at the highest possible level. And here is the timing that no one should overlook. Enoch was taken before the flood arrived. The man who spent 365 years warning the world that judgment was coming, was removed from that world before the judgment landed. As if to say, you have done your part. You do not need to witness what comes next. The flood came, exactly as he said it would. The violence collapsed under the weight of its own corruption, exactly as he said it would. The world was reset, through the family of Enoch's own great-grandson. Enoch was right about everything, the whole time, and nobody believed him until it was far too late to matter. There is an ancient book, quoted in your New Testament, referenced by the earliest Christian writers, preserved for 1500 years by one of the world's oldest churches, a book that was deliberately removed from the Bible that most people in the Western world were raised reading, a book that was effectively hidden from public view for over 1,000 years. And when it was finally recovered, when the world finally got to read what had been kept from them, scholars, historians, and theologians could not agree on what to do with what they found inside. That book is called the Book of Enoch, and it is the most important text you have probably never read. Here is what most people do not know. The Book of Enoch did not disappear from history by accident. It was excluded from the biblical canon during a formal process of selection, council meetings, held centuries after the original texts were written, in which powerful men decided which books would be handed to the public and which books would not. The Book of Enoch did not make the list, and for over 1,000 years it was effectively erased from Western religious life, known to exist in fragments, referenced in passing by scholars who had partial access to it, but impossible for an ordinary person to read in full, until the year 1773, That year, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce returned from Ethiopia, and he brought with him something that the Western world had not seen in centuries: 3 complete, intact copies of the Book of Enoch, preserved, untouched, carried through 1,500 years of history by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, one of the oldest Christian institutions on earth, which had never stopped treating this text as Holy Scripture. The world finally got to read what had been hidden. What they found inside was unlike anything in the standard biblical canon. The Book of Enoch contains detailed descriptions of the angelic hierarchy, ranks, roles, and responsibilities of divine beings that are barely hinted at in the version of Scripture most people know. It contains astronomical observations that scholars argue were remarkably sophisticated for the era in which they were recorded. It contains the full account of the Watchers, their descent, their forbidden teachings, their corruption of humanity, and their ultimate judgment. And at its center, it contains the first-person accounts of Enoch himself, his journeys through what the text describes as multiple layers of heaven, his encounters with beings of immense power, his witnessing of the cosmic scales of justice, where every human act, every cruelty, every kindness, was recorded and weighed with perfect accuracy. Nothing forgotten, nothing unpunished, nothing unrewarded. And then there is this fact that should stop every reader cold. The New Testament book of Jude, a book that is in the Bible that no one removed, that sits in every version of Scripture you have ever held, quotes the Book of Enoch directly. Not a paraphrase, not an echo, a direct quotation. Jude writes about Enoch prophesying that God would come with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment on the ungodly. That prophecy is in the Book of Enoch. If the text was accurate enough to quote, why was it removed? That is a question that has never received a fully satisfying answer. But here is what Enoch's story ultimately comes down to. Strip away the celestial journeys. Strip away the Watchers and the Nephilim and the forbidden knowledge and the angelic hierarchies. At its core, this is a story about one man. A man who lived in a world that was deeply, fundamentally, and violently broken. A man who saw that brokenness clearly, more clearly than anyone around him. A man who had the courage, against every pressure, against every laugh and dismissal and act of deliberate cruelty, to keep speaking the truth anyway. He was ignored. He was mocked. He was treated as dangerous. He was treated as insane. He kept going. And when his life ended, it ended in a way that has no precedent and no parallel in all of recorded human history. Not with death, with translation, with recognition, with God essentially saying, I see what you did. I see who you were. And you are not done yet. The world has always tried to silence the voices that see clearly. Always tried to remove the books that ask uncomfortable questions. Always tried to discredit the people who refuse to make peace with what is broken. And those voices, those books, those people, have always outlasted everything that tried to stop them. Enoch warned the world for 365 years. Nobody listened. And thousands of years later, you are still here listening to his story. That is not an accident. That is what truth does. It survives. If this series moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. The next chapter goes even deeper. The Nephilim, the specific secrets Azazel taught, and why this ancient story maps onto the modern world in ways that should make all of us uncomfortable. Subscribe, because the next one will change how you see everything. A man vanished from this earth, without dying. No grave, no body, no record of death. And the ancient texts that document his disappearance also claim he knew, decades in advance, that civilization was about to be destroyed. He warned everyone around him. Nobody listened. And then he was gone, before the catastrophe arrived. This is the story of Enoch, and it is far stranger, and far more documented, than most people realize. To understand Enoch, you have to understand the world he was born into, because that world had a problem that went much deeper than politics, or poverty, or war. It had lost its moral center entirely. Ancient Jewish writings describe this era, the generations before the Great Flood, as a time when violence had become so normalized that people no longer recognized it as wrong. The strong took from the weak without shame. Rulers used power as a weapon against the people beneath them, and the basic understanding that human life had value had nearly disappeared. Historians and theologians who study this period describe it as a civilizational collapse from the inside. The structures were still standing, the cities were still populated, but something essential had rotted away at the foundation. Now, according to the Book of Enoch, one of the most significant ancient texts connected to the biblical tradition, this collapse had a specific cause, and that cause was not entirely human. The Book of Enoch describes a group of divine beings, known as the Watchers. According to this text, they were assigned to observe humanity, not to interfere, not to participate, to watch. From a distance, they broke that assignment. 200 of them descended to earth, led by figures the ancient writings name as Azazel and Semjaza. They integrated into human civilization, they took human partners, and they brought with them knowledge that humanity was not prepared to handle. Secrets of metalwork and warfare, techniques of manipulation and psychological control, practices the text describes as corrupting the natural order of human life. The children born from these unions, the text calls them the Nephilim, beings of unusual size and strength, who destabilized entire regions. Scholars debate how literally to interpret these accounts. Some read them as historical description, others see symbolic language, a way of explaining why civilization degraded so rapidly in this period. What is not debated is that the world described in these texts was in a state of serious, accelerating collapse, and into that world, quietly, without announcement, a child was born. His name was Enoch, and no one, not one single person, could have guessed what this child would become, or how his story would end. He did not rise to power. He did not command armies. He did not build anything that history remembers. What he did was simpler, and in the world he lived in, far more radical. He paid attention. 3 words from the book of Genesis describe his entire life. 3 words. For a man who lived 365 years, he walked with God. In that world, those 3 words were not a compliment. They were a statement of radical defiance. And that defiance was about to cost him everything, except his life. In 1773, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce returned from Ethiopia. He carried with him 3 manuscripts, complete, intact, carefully preserved. These manuscripts contain the full text of the Book of Enoch, a document that had been effectively inaccessible to the Western world. For over 1,000 years, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church had maintained it as sacred scripture throughout that entire period, never letting it disappear, the way it had disappeared everywhere else. When scholars finally got to read it in full, what they found inside raised questions that have never been fully resolved. The Book of Enoch is not a short text. It is detailed, it is structured, and in places, it reads less like mythology and more like a formal account of events that the author believed were historically real. It describes the Watchers in specific terms. Their leader, Azazel, is credited with teaching humanity the art of weapons manufacturing, specifically, the forging of swords, the construction of shields. Before this, the text implies, organized warfare at that scale did not exist. He also taught, according to the ancient record, the arts of vanity, the use of appearance and beauty as tools of social manipulation. Other Watchers taught sorcery, astrology used not for navigation or agriculture, but for control over other people. The ancient account states plainly, because of what was taught, the earth was filled with blood. Enoch was present for all of this. He was not a ruler who could legislate against it. He was not a warrior who could fight it. He was one person, watching a civilization he loved destroy itself, with tools it had been given, by forces it did not fully understand. And that watching, that sustained, painful, clear-eyed attention, began to do something to him. Ancient accounts describe Enoch as a man who increasingly withdrew from the ordinary rhythms of his society, not out of cowardice, not out of indifference, but because what he was seeing drove him into a kind of sustained prayer and reflection that most people around him found incomprehensible. Why are you always alone? Why do you pray when nothing is listening? Why do you look at this city like it is already gone? And then, according to the ancient record, something answered. The Book of Enoch describes Enoch receiving visions of extraordinary intensity. He was shown the celestial judgment, awaiting the watchers, a place of permanent confinement, prepared for beings who had violated the boundaries of their existence. He was shown the structure of divine justice, that nothing done in this world disappears unrecorded, that every act of cruelty and every act of faithfulness is weighed with perfect accuracy. He was shown what was coming for the earth. And then, Enoch was given the most difficult assignment imaginable. Go back. Tell them what you have seen. Warn them. While there is still time. Enoch walked back into that civilization with the full weight of what he had been shown. And he opened his mouth, and the world told him to be quiet. There is a particular kind of loneliness that has no name. It is the loneliness of knowing something true, something important, something urgent, and being surrounded by people who are entirely certain you are wrong, not people who are considering your argument and rejecting it thoughtfully, people who have decided, without listening, that you are not worth their time. That was Enoch's daily life. For decades, the book of Genesis records Enoch living for 365 years, a lifespan equal in number to the days of a solar year. Whether that figure is meant literally or carries symbolic weight, the ancient record is consistent. Enoch's life was long, and he spent that length of time doing the same thing, with the same consistency, in the face of the same response. He warned. He spoke about the consequences of violence. In a culture that celebrated violence, he spoke about the corruption the Watchers had introduced into civilization. In a society that had fully embraced that corruption as normal, he told people, as directly as the ancient accounts suggest, person could, that the trajectory they were on had an end, and that end was not going to be gradual or partial. It was going to be total. And they laughed at him, openly, consistently. Think about what that actually costs a person, to be right, and to know you are right, and to watch the people you care about choose, day after day, not to hear you. There is a version of this experience that breaks people, that turns the prophet into a bitter man, or a silent one, or one who eventually decides the world is not worth saving, and stops trying. Enoch did not become that man. The ancient account does not describe a figure who grew angry, or cynical, or defeated. It describes someone who simply kept walking the same path, the hard one, the unpopular one, the one that cost him relationships and reputation, and the ordinary comfort of belonging. And the Bible's entire description of Enoch's character fits in 3 words. 3 words. For a life of 365 years, he walked with God. Now here is the detail that changes the entire shape of this story. Enoch was the great-grandfather of Noah, the man who spent his entire life warning that a flood was coming, was the direct ancestor of the one man who would be given instructions to survive it. Jewish tradition surrounding these texts specifically draws the connection that the knowledge, the faith, the understanding that Enoch carried did not die with the people who ignored him. It traveled through the bloodline, passed through generations. It reached a man named Noah, who believed it enough to spend years of his life building something the people around him considered insane. Enoch warned. Noah built. One planted the seed. In a world that refused to grow it, the other harvested it. In the middle of the storm. But before any of that, before the rain, before the ark, before Noah, Enoch had one final chapter, an ending so strange, so without precedent, so impossible to fit into ordinary categories of human experience, that people are still trying to explain it. Thousands of years later, he was here yesterday, he is not here today. Not injured. Not ill. Not gone on a journey that someone knew about. Not dead in any way that a body, or a grave, or a record of passing could confirm. Just not here. The ancient account of Enoch's departure from this world is contained in a single verse of Genesis. 8 words in the English translation. In the original Hebrew, even fewer. Enoch walked with God. Then he was no more, because God took him. That is the entire description. No scene. No witnesses described. No physical account of what occurred. No explanation of what God took him means. In practical terms, just, he was no more. Every human being who has ever lived has faced one universal experience: death. Pharaohs who considered themselves divine died. Military conquerors who reshaped the map of the world died. Scholars, poets, prophets, kings, peasants, saints, every one of them, without exception, eventually reached the end that all biological life reaches. The biblical record notes only 2 departures that do not follow this pattern. Elijah, taken up in a whirlwind, witnessed by his student, described in dramatic physical terms, and Enoch, about whom the text says almost nothing, except that one day, God took him, and he was no more. Jewish tradition surrounding Enoch's departure is extensive and detailed. The texts collected under the name Book of Enoch describe his ascent through what the text calls 7 heavens, each revealing something about the structure of divine justice and the history of creation. At the end of this journey, according to these accounts, Enoch is given a permanent role: the scribe of heaven, the one who records what is true, the keeper of the cosmic account of human history. Scholars debate the age of these accounts, their relationship to one another, and how literally they were intended to be read. What is not debated is that Enoch's mysterious departure was one of the most discussed and written about events in all of ancient religious literature. The absence of a body, the absence of a grave, the absence of any account of death. These things demanded explanation, and the explanations that ancient writers offered share one common thread. What happened to Enoch was not ordinary. It was a response, a recognition. Something about the life he had lived produced an outcome that no other human life, before or since, has produced in quite the same way. And then, after Enoch was gone, the world he had warned continued on its course for a while, and then the flood came, exactly as the ancient accounts said he had predicted, and the only family that survived it was the family of his great-grandson. The man who had been right about everything was not present to see it confirmed. He had been taken before the confirmation arrived. Make of that what you will, but consider the shape of it. For a moment, a man spends his life being told he is wrong. He keeps speaking. He keeps walking. He never stops. And then, before the evidence arrives, that would have silenced every person who dismissed him, he is gone. As if the point was never about being vindicated. As if the point was always just the walking. For over 1,000 years, the Western world did not have access to the full text of the Book of Enoch, not because it did not exist, because it had been excluded from the canon of Scripture, standardized and distributed across the Western Church, left out during a process of formal selection that happened centuries after the original texts were written. It survived because one community held on to it. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, one of the oldest continuously practicing Christian institutions in the world, never let it go. They maintained it as sacred scripture. Through 1,500 years of history, wars, invasions, the rise and fall of empires. When James Bruce arrived in Ethiopia in the late 18th century and returned with 3 complete copies of the text, Western scholars encountered for the first time what that church had been reading all along. What they found inside was unusual by any measure. The Book of Enoch contains structured, detailed accounts of angelic hierarchy, astronomical observations that researchers have described as sophisticated for their period, the full narrative of the Watchers, their descent, their teachings, their judgment, in far more detail than any other surviving ancient text, and Enoch's first-person accounts, his journeys, his visions, his record of what he was shown, about the structure of justice, and the arc of human history. Now, one detail deserves particular attention. The New Testament Book of Jude, canonical scripture, included in every version of the Bible, contains a direct quotation attributed to Enoch. It describes Enoch prophesying that God would come with thousands of holy ones to execute judgment on the ungodly. That quotation exists in the Book of Enoch, which means a text excluded from the canon was nevertheless considered reliable enough to quote from. Within the canon, scholars have offered various explanations for why the Book of Enoch was ultimately excluded. Its complexity, its detailed angelology, the varying manuscript traditions surrounding it. These are legitimate conversations that continue today in academic circles. What is certain is that the text survived against considerable odds, and it continues to be read. Now, here is the part of this story that reaches across thousands of years and lands directly in the present. The world the Book of Enoch describes, a civilization with extraordinary capability and a collapsing moral foundation, is not a world that requires much imagination to visualize. The ancient account describes people who had access to powerful knowledge they were not wise enough to use responsibly, who built increasingly sophisticated systems of control and violence, who normalized cruelty until it stopped registering as cruelty, who had so completely separated power from accountability that the idea of consequences felt abstract and distant. Whether or not you accept the ancient explanation for how that happened, the pattern it describes is not hard to recognize. Every generation that has read the Book of Enoch has found in it a mirror, not because the ancient world and the modern world are identical, but because certain patterns of human behavior, the worship of power, the normalization of violence, the separation of knowledge from moral responsibility, appear in every era with enough consistency that a warning written thousands of years ago still lands with uncomfortable precision. Enoch warned a world that did not want to hear it. He was ignored, dismissed, and outlived almost everyone who dismissed him. And then he was gone, quietly, without drama, without the vindication he might have been owed. His great-grandson survived the flood. His writings survived the millennia. And his story, the story of one person who paid attention in a world that refused to, is still being told, not because the ending is triumphant, but because the question at the center of it never goes away. What does it cost to see clearly and to keep speaking in a world that has decided not to listen? Enoch's answer, apparently, was everything and also nothing, because the things he gave up were temporary, and the things he held on to, turns out, were not. The Book of Enoch ends, but the questions it raises do not. They are the same questions every generation has had to answer for itself. What do we do with knowledge we cannot fully control? What do we owe the truth when speaking it costs us everything? And what does it mean to walk faithfully, consistently, without recognition, through a world that has stopped looking up? Enoch walked for 365 years. You are still hearing about it. Draw your own conclusions. This series moved you. Share it with someone who is still asking the same questions Enoch was asking. The next chapter goes deeper into the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in 1947, which contained fragments of Enoch, among the oldest known biblical manuscripts. Subscribe, because the story is not finished. This series moved you. Share it with someone who is still asking the same questions Enoch was asking. The next chapter goes deeper into the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in 1947, which contained fragments of Enoch, among the oldest known biblical manuscripts. Subscribe, because the story is not finished.